And there is step number 2. And last but not least, where'd you go? There, right there.
And we'll start the recording with cereal is soup.
Oh my gosh, I'm cutting that out. I'm editing it out, John. It's going to get flagged on Google. All right, I need one more thing here. Perfect. Okay, I have finished my whole checklist here. We are done. We are recording. Welcome to Launch Code. As always, I'm your host, Kyle, and you all are the fine, awesome coders out there ready to learn one more cool thing today. That thing is classes. First things first, you might notice that Kyle's going to be absolutely absent-headed today, and he's in his room when he was supposed to be on travel today. As if you remember Kyle's previous rant, I was not feeling the best on Thursday. Turns out Friday, it turned into, yes, the 2020 COVID. So Kyle's got a little bit of COVID. That will make, I know, it's like, I'm sorry. If I make you feel uncomfortable, I'll put a mask on. Just let me know. But yes, so whenever I get COVID, fortunately, it's not the first time, I get a little airy-headed. And that's why I'm drinking my extra cup of coffee tonight. I've already had a few extra pots today. So just letting you know, I might be absent-minded. I accidentally said apologize instead of agree to a business email today. So that made things weird. So it's just going to be weird today. We're just going to get weird. All right, everybody ready to get weird? Let's do some announcements. All right, assignment number 3. It is time for the Mars rover. As I mentioned last week, assignment number 3 is always one that I recommend highly of taking a look at ASAP. Please, please, please take a look at it. In addition, it is one that typically students or just in general, anybody would like to have some questions on. So in that case, on Thursday, I will be doing a walkthrough of the Mars rover before class. So I'm going to be hopping into our lecture about 4:50. I'll put an announcement out there, the official time, but about 4:50, just to go through a good 30 minutes, 35 minutes of just what assignment 3 is, kind of walk through it, answer any possibly questions at the end if we have that time. So that's all about assignment 3. After tonight, Clark also wanted me to mention this to you all, that you will all have the necessary tools to complete assignment 3. So if you're waiting for that last lecture that you need to complete the whole thing at one time, this is it. So that is all assignment number 3. Continuing on, please install, after you're done with me, whatever on assignment number 3 or the studio review tonight, please install Visual Studio Code ASAP. This is our next up and coming environment. You've taken a closer look or a look ahead in the book. You'll see that this is the next thing. Real quick, I will go ahead and show, if I remember where my stuff is at. Oh, come on. There we go. It's like, you just did this, buddy. All right. We're going to go over here, going to go to contents. So if you were looking for the instructions on how to download a Visual Studio Code, just go to your book for JavaScript here on Launch Code. You're going to scroll all the way to the bottom. As you might have already seen before, you're going to find this setting up software for class. Go ahead and double click, single click, whatever you want to click. And we're going to come down here, setting up for Visual Code. Click on that, and then you see the download page. You click on that download page, and you go ahead and install the proper one for whatever operating system that you have. Please make sure that you follow these to a T. Do not download the paid version for it, because in 30 days, they're going to ask you for a lot of money. So make sure that you download the proper version. That goes for any environment that we do. Make sure you follow these to a T, because there's a lot of good community ones out there that are free, but the second you click the paid one, Microsoft is at your front door asking for a lot of moolah. So do not do that. All right. That is it for that one. Let's hop back to our stuff here. So let's remember, install Visual Studio Code ASAP. And then finally tonight, as always, I'm back with COVID for studio review at 8. So feel free to join in to go over the classes studio review tonight. That being said, that is all of my announcements for tonight. Any questions, concerns, comments on any of that? No, not even a concern? A little bit? All right. In that case, we're going to just have an awkward silence. And let's get going here.
Kyle,
Right.
sorry. Would it be possible to mute, because someone's got some feedback that's just squeaking?
Ooh, yeah, I'll go ahead and mute everyone. Double check yourselves. If you are not talking, feel free to put that on mute here, please. I can't hear the feedback, otherwise I would have done it. I'm so sorry. I honestly want to hear my voice coming through recording, and the first thing I do is try to mute everybody. I hate hearing my voice. I sound like a giant nerd, like I program for a living or something. All right, there we go. Announcements are done. Let's hop into it. By the way, I told you all to turn off mute. JK, turn that mute off and talk to me. Help me out here. We're going to be building a book today. Help me construct an object called book with a title of a dog's tale. What should we start with? Help me out. Start with const or let. In this case, I'm just do let. There's really no issue there. So yes, you're absolutely fine right there. Const also would be appropriate. What comes next?
A dog's tail. Dog's tail.
So take a very close look at our instructions. Book. Take a very close look at our directions. What does it say to call our object?
Book.
Book. Let book equal. And then to build an object, what do we use?
Curly brackets.
Curly brackets, absolutely right. Fantastic. Now, continuing with this question, what do we do next?
That title?
I think I heard most of it, but remember we're building an object. So I heard title, and then we say colon to separate the key from the value. The value in this question was what?
A dog's tail.
A dog's tail. Again, I just like to hear everyone saying a dog's tail. It's hilarious. Title, colon, a dog's tail, comma, very good. Yeah, we can absolutely do comma there if we want to add more properties. I don't know, maybe like an author. How do we add this?
Author, colon.
Colon, very good. And then Stark. Stark is going to be in those double quotes.
Double quotes.
String. Fantastic. One more thing. What if we wanted to do this? Adding a function called rate that book that prints 2 paws up to the screen. How would we add this?
Rate the book. Rate the book, colon.
Very good. I love that. Rate the book, the key with the colon there. And then what comes next?
Function. Function of.
Very good. A function. What's after that?
Parenthesis.
Rate that book.
Parenthesis.
Oh,
I
yes,
love it. 2 parentheses,
anonymous.
open and close curly bracket. And then I'll be the nice person here and I'll put the last thing in there. The console.log. I think I heard that too, to show that to the screen. So we have console.log 2 paws up. So there we go. This is how we can create that object with that title, author, Stark, rate that book, and the console.log. Awesome, awesome. So then finally, let's go ahead and help me out. We've created our book object here. How do I print the title of the book to the screen? What do I do to print things to the screen?
Console.log.
Very good. Console.log. And then what's next?
Book.title.
I think I heard it. I did hear all of it.
Book.title.
Get the title. Very good, everyone. We got it. Book, because that is the name of the variable we're calling to, as we saw above. .title, because that's the property we want to get out of the object. So book.title. Fantastic. One more thing. How would I run the rate the book function using this variable?
Console
rate the book.
rate the book.
Very good. I heard it. Book.rate the book. Remember, this instruction did not tell us to print it out to the screen. It was simply just telling us to run the function. Because if we tried to print out that function, well, we wouldn't be printing out anything. Look at the function itself, rate the book. It already console logs something inside of it. So this is that quick little indicator that we have to really look at our instructions to see what it really wants. In this case, we just say book.rate the book. So very good, everyone. Fantastic. I hope everyone right now is just enjoying all of those fun little book names there. We're going to dive into dogs reading things today. So this is a fun little GIF I found. It's like, what should I put on here while I'm muting everybody? Well, I'm going to put a dog reading. But look at him. Look at him. He thinks he's a person. So cute. All right. Let's hop into some stuff. We just built an object. You all know objects are types of data containers or data structures that hold all that information inside of it. Strings, Booleans, numbers, everything can be locked inside of that object. And we can create as many objects as we want. That's awesome. In this case, we created a book here. Neat. A book called A Dog's Tale. But Stark is an aspiring author. He's hungry to get his knowledge and word out there about his other fun fables. So what if Stark wanted to write 2 more books, one being The Fast and the Furious, or maybe Beowulf? If you couldn't tell, I was having so much fun with this one. These are different books that Stark wants to write out there. What if you wanted to write, I don't know, 500 more books? I was trying to think of like a good other pun on Harry Potter. Oh, you can do Harry Paw, like dog Potter and something. I don't know. I feel like that's already been used. Anyway, what Stark just wants to write all these books? Well, this is a ton of books right here. 500 books. That is a lot of duplicating code. if we want to write a bunch of books, we have to write these objects over and over and over to build a decent library. That, again, as a developer, you need to be extremely lazy. That is not fun to be just copying this code over and over and over to do the same exact thing. So let's go ahead and take a look at something. We're going to try to find a way to actually simplify what we're doing here. Let's bring in that book that we were written the first time in our example, and we'll bring over the Fast and the Furriest here. Take a very close look at these two objects. They are a book, but they are two different books. They're A Dog's Tale and The Fast and the Furriest from two different titles. But take a closer look at the keys. The keys between these two objects are the exact same. Our property names are the exact same. That's awesome because the books, especially in these examples that we're going to be dealing with today, are going to be the exact same. So when we're talking about this, our book thing, this book object that we're building, has the exact same properties. So we can build basically the same kind of book with these properties that it's continuously asking for. The title, the author, the rate that book. Every book that Stark's going to write is going to have these three things about it. That's awesome. So instead of consistently writing these codes, we need something out there that can take these two objects or objects that are of the similar structure and reduce it into a single thing. The thing that we're going to be talking about today, the thing that does this, that helps simplify our code into a simple format or structure, it's called a class. This is helping us take objects of the same, again, same structure and turning it into one thing that is able to be constructed in different ways. So we are able to take something, again, of similar structure and construct it in similar ways, but customize it. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about what I mean by constructing this thing in different ways. Let's bring our little book format or book structure that we've already talked about with that title, author, and rate that book. Now, like we said, any book that Stark writes is going to have these three properties. So we need to make something that can always take in these three properties. The class. To start building a class, we use the keyword, of course, class. And this is a reserved keyword to start creating this thing. The next thing we're going to do is actually create the name of the book. Or excuse me, create the name of the class. There's that airhead in this. I was wondering where it's going to be. So in this case, we're going to say class and then book. Book being the name of the class. And when you're as a developer standpoint, this is up to your creativity. Book is the one we're talking about today. And then again, you're going to include those curly brackets there. So we say class, book, open and close curly bracket. The thing that denotes us creating a class is this keyword here. So don't forget about that. One more thing I want to review here too. Take a look at book. Take a very, very close look. This was not a mistake. The names of our classes are always, 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 always capitalized. So book needs to have a capital B. If you create a class called cookie, it needs to have a capital C. All classes must start with a capital letter. That is strict standard. You're not going to get an error, but you're going to get yelled at by any potential coders out there that are looking at your code. Always capitalize the names of your classes. All right, awesome. So this is how we can start constructing our class. Now, one thing, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to start writing it out here. Take all that out. There we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it class and then book and open and close curly brackets. Perfect. All right. So we have a class here. A class can be thought of as, think of our first lecture that we had. We were trying to build a cake. Everything goes to excuse me, oh my gosh. We were trying to build a cake. Everything goes sequentially in that. Let's talk about building a cake. In order to cook a cake or cook anything, you typically have a recipe card. That recipe card is instructions on how to create that cake or any kind of food item. Now, why I'm talking about this is that think of a class as the recipe card. Now ask yourself, can you eat a recipe card? No, you cannot eat a recipe card. The card itself is only to create the cake. So in that case, in this class, we need to tell it how to construct our cake, or in this case, construct our book. So in order to do that, we need to have something that tells it within the class to how to construct this thing, this book. What we use is the keyword called constructor with an open parentheses there. What this does is takes in customizable attributes or parameters to build your class how it wants to be built. In this case for book, as we saw in our previous example, the object's titles or the book's titles always changed. So the title's always changing. So we're going to include title in here because it's something that always changes book to book, as well as the author, because maybe Stark won't be the only author, or maybe a completely another book will be written in our library that wasn't made by him. So these two things change from book to book. So we include those in our parameters within our constructor. Then we include this new keyword, this. We'll talk about this in a little bit. But in order to define the characteristics of our class, we need to use the keyword this, and then what we want to define. In this case, the title, and then equal to what's passed in through the constructor, title. Same with the author. We say this dot author equals to author. Now to really talk about this here, this keyword, this is extremely powerful. It's an extremely powerful keyword that talks about the variable that's within the class's scope. Remember scope from our previous class. Basically what this does is it sets the value of a variable within the scope of a class, of an instance of a class. So we'll explore a little bit more as we move forward in what I'm talking about, the scope of a class or the instance of a class here in a few moments. So this right here is how we create the class. The constructor, what actually builds it. Now remember or we take a look over to our left here, we're missing one more thing. We have the title and the author, we're missing the rate the book. So one more thing I want to show you is how to create our rate the book function within the class. What we're going to do is that we start with the name of the function. Open and close parentheses, because just like in the example, we don't have any parameters coming in there. Open and close curly brackets. And then of course we console log to pause up. Perfect. Now take a moment here. You might be noticing something missing. We don't use the keyword function within classes anymore. Take big note on that. When you are building a function within a class, you will not use the keyword function to build it. You'll just use the name of the function, open and close parentheses, open and close curly brackets, and then your code in the center. Essentially what it's doing is that it already knows you want to build a function in this class. So it's like, okay, don't worry about it. I got this. I'll build it for you. No need to use that function keyword. Awesome. So that right there is how we build a class. Let's go over to Replit and actually see this thing in work. So we have our class book here. So one thing I want to ask first is that when we start building a class, what is the one thing that we just talked about that actually builds the class to our specifications or with our customizable variables? What's the thing that we use?
Constructor.
Very good, the constructor, and actually construct it. So we're going to say constructor here. And then what goes inside the parentheses?
The title and the
Variable name.
Yeah, exactly. The title of the author or any variable name that we want to pass in order to build this class however we want. So in this case, for example, it's just title and author. There we go. Now I want to set my class variable to whatever's passed into the parameters. What keyword do I use to do that?
This
title. Very good. We're going to do the title first, but this is the keyword that we're using to actually set information inside of our class instance. So this dot title, and we will say title. And then we'll do the same for the author. Equals author. Now, real quick, one thing I really don't like about examples is when they use the names that are the exact same, but are two different things. To show here, what I want to do is that I'm going to say title param up here and author param and show you what is attached to what. Okay, can anyone tell me if I wanted to replace title param with this one or this one, should I do the left or the right?
Okay, that's right.
Very good.
It's
You
right.
absolutely heard it. The right. Well, you want to put it on the right-hand side. Now take a closer look at this. The name that's up here in the parameter is the one on the right-hand side because that's the value we're going to be assigning to the left-hand side. This dot title. Title being the class variable name. That's how we're actually taking in that information and putting into the class so it remembers. Using that keyword this. Awesome. All right, I'm gonna go down a little bit here And one more thing we have to do, we need to write a function called rate the book. How would I start writing it?
Rate the book.
Just rate the book. Very good. Rate the book. Open and close parentheses, open and close curly bracket, and then I'll do it for us. Console.log to pause up. Ooh, can't write 2 today. To pause up. There we go. Awesome. Awesome. 1. There we go. Perfect. So very good. This right here is constructing our class. Remember, if we come back here, class was how we started defining that. Well, book was the way of how we actually named that function. But we come down here, constructor is actually how we build the class. And we'll talk about building it here in a moment. In order to set information though inside that built class, we have to use the this keyword, this.title or this.author. The final thing to remember is that when we're building a function for rate the book, it no longer has that function name. Awesome. So I'm gonna hop back over here, pause for a moment, because that was a lot of stuff I just threw at you. Any questions on your guys' end? Anything about classes?
So after this word, you have to use the key of the in value and key pair. That title should be the key.
We'll take a look at it here in a moment, just to make sure. But yeah, we are just creating it. So making sure there's any questions on creating it, but we'll see what's actually ticking inside of it here in a moment. So hopefully I'll answer your question. Hold on, hold on to that question just for a moment and we'll get back to it.
Okay.
Pinky promise. All right, anything else just from creating the class? All right, this is the fun part, right? We're just creating our recipe to build something, in this case, a book. But again, this is just a recipe card. We can't eat a recipe card. There's nothing fun about it. We want to eat the cake. We don't want to eat that thing. So we have to actually build our stuff. So let's go ahead and move a little bit further to see actually how we can build our stuff so we can actually work with something. All right. So we, again, just define this to help us build a class. But just like how we do it kind of with functions, remember functions, you have to create the function and then you run the function. For classes, you have to tell it how to create it by constructing the class and then actually create one. Let's go ahead and talk about that second part now, creating it. So for that, take a look at our left-hand side here. We have our book class already created in the left, top left there. And now we actually want to go ahead and create a book. We're gonna have Stark actually write one of these books. So let's go ahead and do that. As always, when we're trying to create a new variable, we start with one of 2 things, let or const. In this case, I've chosen let, just arbitrarily. And then I'm gonna call it whatever my variable name is, book 1. Of course, this is up to your discretion. And then equals this thing called new, and then the name of our class, book. So there we go, it's a new book, and then open parentheses, and then a dog's tail, comma, and then Stark. Right here is how we construct a class in one line. Let's go ahead and dive a little bit deeper into it before we start actually using it. Let's take a look at this one keyword here that we saw, new. Now, we might have seen this in previous examples here and there, but we haven't actually worked with it before. We have not seen new actually out there in the wild that we've been wanting to use for. So what does it mean exactly? New means I want to create an instance of a class. Again, to our cake example, I want to bake a cake. I want to actually have something tangible to work with. I want a cheesecake right now. That sounds actually amazing right now. It was a cheesecake. I want to actually have a cheesecake or whatever kind of chocolate cake. I want something I can actually eat. Again, can you need a recipe card? No. In order to get a cake, bake a cake, create a book, create an instance, you use the keyword new. So again, remember, when we created this class here, this is the recipe card of how to construct a class. To get an instance of it, to actually have something we can work with, we have to use the keyword new to build one of those instances. So this new means I want to create a new instance of this book class. So that's the first thing. Let's take a look at the second part here. New book, which is the name of our class, and then the parentheses, a dog's tail, if you remember that, that's our title. And then Stark, if you remember that, that's our author from our example. Now, what this means is that you are calling upon the constructor when you run this. You are calling upon the constructor when you are running this. Take a look at our example over here on the left-hand side. When you pass in a dog's tail in Stark, that data is sent over to our recipe card, our book class, and says, for title, I want it to be a dog's tail. For author, I want it to be Stark. That information is then inside of there. Look what happens in the constructor. We set those variable names, those class variables, to whatever information is passed through in those parameters. So remember, see how our information flows. This is very important to see how it is actually all ticking inside. So once that information is passed there, we're able to actually get the book, or we're actually able to create an instance of a tangible book to work with. So let's go ahead and see that in action. I'm gonna go ahead and mute themselves. There we go. So we're gonna go ahead and create an instance now of this book. Someone talk me through it. I'll start us out. Let book 1 to start our variables out, and then what comes next to start creating the instance?
New.
Good. New, that very, very powerful keyword too. New, and then what comes after that?
Book.
With a capital
Book.
Parentheses. Then
Parentheses.
Title.
then value.
Title. Anybody got a good dog book out there by any chance?
Yeller. Clifford.
All right, L. Yeller. Very sad. Very sad. I don't even know who the author is, so we're gonna say Stark wrote that one too. And I'm pretty sure oh yeah, I don't think I spelled that correct at all. All right. Anyway, so yeah, we're gonna do Old Yeller here and then Stark for the author. So new book, perfect. So we just constructed our book here. Again, we use that keyword new to say, hey, I want to create a new instance of this, create a book that has the name Old Yeller and then Stark, just like that. Why Replit has been showing me this little, this little red piece right here, I have no idea. Just ignore that, there's no error, I don't believe. Let me go and run this and double check. Perfect, yep, we're all good. All right, so there we go. We are able now to create an instance of the book. So again, this is how we create the recipe or how we want to construct the book. And this is how we actually create an instance of the book. Any questions on this before we dive a little bit deeper into what we can do with this instance?
Would new book be a string?
So new book, like when you say string, you want new and book to be a string, or?
Yeah, like in quotations.
So it's actually not a string. New is a powerful keyword, just like let is. So new is a keyword, and then book is the name of your class. So remember, strings is only to hold data. We're not holding data in this variable. We're instead building something to hold data. So this thing right here is going to be built to hold that data. So I can see where you're coming from if you wanted to put like this in quotes. In that case, we're not constructing a class at all. Instead, we're just building a giant string that says new book. But we actually want to build a book, not a string that says book. So there we go. This is how we're going to actually construct that data container, that class thing that's going to contain all that information inside of it.
Hi, I have a question.
Yeah, Rena.
Okay, can you write it down, line number 13, 2 step, like let first time let a book 1 equal to new book, then parenthesis, after that book 1 equal to put the value. Can you?
Are you saying that you want to create a second book?
No.
Do you
Number
want to change
13. Number 13. Can we make it 2 step? Like first time we can make a assign. Make a new book. Then book equal to put the value.
Oh, okay. You're saying, can you reassign?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. You can always reassign your variables as long as they're let. So if you wanted to do a reassignment to a different kind of book, like Old Yeller 2, which I don't think there would ever be one. So Old Yeller 2 and with Stark. Terrible joke, I'm sorry. Book 1, but we can always reassign it.
Okay.
So
thank
yes,
you.
the answer is yes. You can always reassign your let variables. Remember, you can always reassign it also to any kind of value.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
we wouldn't typically, absolutely. We typically wouldn't want to do that though. Once we build an object, we want to hold on to it. Once we build an instance of a class, we want to hold on to it. So I wouldn't recommend doing that, but it is possible. All right, great questions. So now we've been able to build an instance of this class. Let's go ahead and take a little bit closer look at what we can actually do with this thing. Let's go back over here. So we have built that instance using the keyword new. Awesome. Let's go ahead and how do we actually utilize the information inside of the class? Okay, how do I get the title out of the variable now? Well, for that one, it's just like the object. We say book one, which is the name of our instance of our class, dot title. We want to show it to the screen. Of course, we wrap that in a console.log. So there we go. If we go over here, we say it's console.log, book one dot title. There we go. And we see that we have Old Yeller. So that console log is going to print that out. So we get those properties out just like how we did before. Now, definitely do note in this example that we're showing here, we say book one dot title, not book one dot title param. We do not do title param because the title param was just the information coming in through the parentheses that we assigned over to this. Now, one thing I really want to show is that if I call it the title, take a very close look. This is how we were setting those properties. If I run this now, I'm going to get undefined because it doesn't exist. I need to do the title here in order to get that. So whatever you put up here is how you call it outside of the class. There we go. Awesome. Now, one more thing I want to show you all. So how would I get the rate the book function outside of this instance of the class? Well, just like how we did over our objects, it doesn't change at all. It's still book one dot rate that book. Excuse me. So we come over here and we do book one dot rate that book, open and close parentheses. And we go and run that. And we see that Old Yeller, I do wrong. Oh, rate the book, not rate that book. There we go, rate the book. We do that and we see it's Old Yeller and 2 paws up. Awesome. All right, one more example I want to show just briefly here. So if I see book one, and now I'm going to do my second book here, and it's going to be The Fast and the Furious, also by Star. There we go. If I come down here and I run this again, what title am I going to get? Anybody want to shout out the answer to me?
Old Yeller.
Old Yeller.
Old Yeller.
Yeah, so I'm going to get Old Yeller. Absolutely right. Old Yeller and 2 paws up because I'm calling to that instance of the object. It says Old Yeller. Now if I come down here and I say book 2 dot title, now what is my output going to be?
Fast and the Furious.
The Fast
The Fast and the Furious.
The Furious.
Absolutely right. Yes, The Fast and the Furious. So it all depends, just like when you're calling your objects, it depends on what instance of your class that you're calling that you'll get that output. So book 1 dot title. So now we'll get both of them back here. We'll get Old Yeller and Fast and the Furious, and then 2 paws up. So this right here is showing us that we can call to the same book class and construct it in 2 different ways. It's kind of like following the recipe in 2 different ways. Instead of chocolate cake, you make a vanilla cake because whatever, you left out one part of it or something like that. Just like this, you're constructing 2 different books with 2 different titles and maybe 2 different authors if you wanted to, because you're creating or you're passing in these parameters or arguments here a little bit differently. But you're still calling to the same exact class, just constructing it differently. So here I'm going to pause for a moment. Any questions on this?
Kyle,
yeah, Hannah.
If we say console.log book2.rate the book, we would get the 2 paws up again, right?
If you're saying you switch a 1 to a 2 here?
Uh-huh.
Yep, absolutely. We run that, we'll get that 2 paws up the same. It's coming from the same, absolutely, it's coming from the same class.
Are the contents of classes called properties as well?
Yes, yes, you can refer to them as properties, class variables, things of that nature. So right now, yeah, you can refer to them still as properties.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? See some people thinking. Nope. All right. Then let's keep going here, everyone. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and just in case. There we go. So we have our we have a book class up here in the top left as we continue on. What if we wanted to create an instance of the class for Beowulf written by Stark? As always, we just saw what we have to do here. So you already told me how we did this, so I'm going to talk us through it. As always, we put let, and then for this case, we're going to put book number 2. In order to start creating that new instance, we use the keyword new, and then book, and then open parentheses, and then the title of that book. In this case, it's going to be Beowulf. Then comma, and then we put Stark in there. Again, take a close look at this. It's going to create a separate instance of a book from our first book or the other books that we created in the examples. Completely separate instances. Different spots for our information, different containers. That's what this is doing here. So it's extremely useful to do this because you can now keep all of your information about a certain context, whether it be a book or a cake or credit cards or medical information, whatever you want to do. You can create classes that contain all of that information for you right then and there. So if you're asking yourself, what are the differences between objects and classes? Not too much necessarily, especially in JavaScript's eyes, because they both contain information. It's how the class is created. It separates itself from the object. The object, you have to very slowly structure it, like exactly mold the clay to however you want it to be. For classes, you define the structure first. So every object that's created with that structure, that class afterwards, has to follow the same exact structure, giving your code it's like a true standard that your objects have to follow by. So that's a big difference between the two. Actually giving your code some true standard and hard. Oh, I'm using structure way too much today, but it is exactly that. It is giving your code some super strong structure when it comes to your objects. All right. So that is it. Let's go see. So as I'm just getting ahead of myself here, this is how we're supposed to be creating a instance of our class. Again, it's that recipe card that we're using to create those classes. All right. This is more for me than for you, but just for fun, let's all take a quick brain break. Help me out here. Let's go ahead and talk about some true hard-hitting topics in life right now. In class, before erasers, pencils were commonly erased with what?
Bread.
And I got guesses. Heard some.
Bread.
Bread?
Heard bread. Anything else? It is absolutely bread. Let's just see here what other people think. Awesome. Yes, it is white bread. White bread on there. Didn't have erasers. So there we go. Just use some bread. Why not? All right. When erasers were invented, teachers resisted them because they thought that it would encourage what?
Mistakes.
Cheating?
Mistakes.
Did someone, if you downloaded the slides, don't you dare keep using it. I don't know if I should be trusting you guys right now, but very good. It is mistakes. It is mistakes. All right. Finally, giving teachers apples dates back to the 16th century in Denmark, which started because teachers, what?
Were poor.
It's scurvy.
Had scurvy?
Oh my gosh, no, but it was close to poor. It's because they could not afford food.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my gosh, when I was looking at these facts, I was like, that is cruel. Oh,
Teachers used to have to live with their students because they didn't have a place to live, which is why most teachers were female in America.
Oh my God. See, I love asking this because I learn something new every time.
Which is almost how it is now.
I was just going to say that. That must have changed.
It is. Honestly, I think teachers always deserve a raise. They take a lot of guff, especially like me as a teenager. It's like, no, they should just get a raise just for what they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis with those kids. All right, everyone. Awesome. Hopefully everyone got a good brain break there. I kind of did. Let's keep going. Let's dive a little bit deeper into class here. LOL. Let's go ahead and bring back in Oh, I did. Did I spell Old Yeller right too? Thank you, Ann, for that, by the way. I was like, I totally guessed it. I was like, Yeller, E-R? Awesome. All right. I'm like slowly getting myself confidence back up there. All right, take it from your parents. Let's talk about it. We brought our book class back in here. And also, and I think Stark did write that, but I will change it to Fred Gibson here. Well, thank you for.
I didn't know the bread thing, so I was trying for whatever I could get.
All right. So Stark has been writing books left and right. He wrote Beowulf. He wrote, oh gosh, Fast and the Furious. I forgot the first one he wrote. But we'll say he contributed to Old Yeller. But what if Stark now wanted to go down a different path? He wanted to start creating cookbooks. He wants to get into the cooking thing. Just like we were talking about cakes, whatever. I love to do the cooking. So Stark's going to love to do the cooking because that's my dog's personality. I know it will be. So we're going to talk about building cookbooks. Let's go ahead and bring in a cookbook here. As you know, cookbooks will have a title, whatever it's going to be. I can't think of a good, I'm not being like very creative today, so I can't think of a good dog cookbook, but I'm sure you all can. Title of a cookbook. The next thing is an author in there, which again will be Stark, of course, because he's trying to get famous. And then the rate the book, because we're going to rate a cookbook. That's still a thing. But for cookbooks, whether it be maybe desserts or entrees, it's going to have a food type. What kind of food does this cookbook actually create? Now, if we wanted to create this class, talk to me, but don't unmute, just talk me through it here. If we wanted to build this class, what keyword do we start with? We start with the class keyword, and we call it cookbook with a capital C there. That's how we start creating our class. Now, if we think about it, how would we actually start creating that constructor? Well, we'd have our constructor in there with our title and our author, because that's what our cookbook has in there. But what's the new one we're going to be adding? The food type. Very good, absolutely, that food type there. Now, take a very close look at this example we just did to the far right. Does it look very similar to something? It absolutely does. It looks very similar to our book object or our book class. Sorry, I did not mean to call it a book object, our book class. So, as a developer, what should you always have on your mind? How to be more lazy. I think I heard the correct thing, but how to be more lazy. This right here is not what you want to do, because you know there is a class out there that is already extremely similar to something we just built, this cookbook. So let's go ahead. We're going to reduce our amount of code and the amount of time we have to be in there on a Friday. So what we need to do is bring in that book class. Awesome. We have our book class here. We have all of our attributes with it, all those properties and those functions. Now let's bring in our cookbook just for an example there. Ooh, wrong thing. Now we bring in our cookbook there. Again, looking at book, what is the one property that differs from the cookbook to the book? The answer is that food type. So everything else is the same except for food type, and we're going to keep that in mind as we build our cookbook again in a more simplistic manner. First things first, we're going to start building the cookbook by just saying class cookbook. Nothing's changed there. We still need to name our class, and we still need to tell JavaScript it's going to be a class with that keyword. But now we want to say, hey, cookbook, you are a lot like book. Therefore, I want you to be just like book in all of its ways and maybe some extra. To tell it that I want you to bring in all of the properties of book, we use the keyword extends. And then the class we want to extend from. Again, just think of it as inheriting, that word inheritance, or getting all of the things from your parent or that class and bringing it into your own. Come on, there we go. So we want to, there we go. All right, so yeah, we want to say class cookbook extends, and then whatever class we want to bring in all the properties from, in this case again, is book. So awesome, this is how we can start doing this. Let's keep exploring it. Let's build what we need to build first. Remember, the first thing we need to do when we create a class is create the constructor. So in this case, I'm gonna write constructor, and then all of the properties I want to define for my cookbook. In this case, it's title, author, and food type. Remember, those are the three things we want to create our class with. Now, the one that was different, we said, was food type. So in order to set the food type in the class, what I say is this.food type, excuse me, wow, this.food type equals food type. Cool. Now, what we saw previously in the cookbook example is that we wanted to make sure that, Oh my gosh. Come on, computer. You are definitely having Monday right now. There we go. So from our previous example, we said this dot title, this dot author, this dot food type. That is not what we want to do. We want to simplify that. What we want to do is say, hey, reach out to my parent, the book, and set all of its properties inside of it. How we can do that is using this keyword called super. Super basically says, go to my super class, go to my parent above it, and give it this information in order to save all of that stuff inside of it. So super is going to take in all of those properties of book, the class that we extended. So it says super, and then I'm going to say title and author. Now again, we use the supers because we use the keyword extends. If we don't extend a class, we will not be using the keyword super. Remember that this super keyword is going to pass whatever information is put inside of its parentheses into the constructor of the class that it's been extending. That is a big thing to take a look at right here. When we pass information in this super, it is going to call to the constructor of whatever class we extend and pass all the information into it. This is absolutely necessary to successfully build a class that extends another class or inherits another class. So this is extremely fun. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at what we can do here. Or let's actually take a closer look at building this piece by piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out all of this stuff here. There we go. Just like that. And there we go. We're going to start building a cookbook. So I say class cookbook. Now I want to take in all of the properties of books. So what keyword am I going to use to do that?
Extends.
Very good. Extends. Extends, again, is going to take in everything from the class that I provided. So the class I want to take in is book. Open and close curly brackets. Perfect. So now I'm able to take in all of this stuff up here. So the next thing, the first thing, once I start building a class, I need to put this next thing in there. What is that thing that builds the class?
Constructor.
Constructor. Very good. So I say title, author, and then the food type, just like that. Perfect. And then I'm going to give us this one. I'm going to say this dot food type. Food type. There we go, because I'm setting that in there. And then how am I going to pass information to my super classes?
Super.
Constructor. Very good. Super. Absolutely. Super. Say title and author. Now remember, when this thing gets constructed, this super is going to go immediately up here to book and say, hey, I'm going to call to this constructor. And then it's going to set all those class variables all within that same instance of the class. So nice. Let's go and run this and make sure we don't get any errors first. Looks like we're all good. Let's go and start creating an instance of the cookbook. Who can talk me out through with creating an instance of a cookbook? Cool. I'm going to call it cookbook just for cookbook 1, just for fun. And then what comes next?
Equal to new.
Very good. All right.
Cookbook.
Ooh. Awesome.
Parentheses.
Anybody got a name for a cookbook?
Title.
Anybody out there? Any cookbook name?
Pedaling through Provence.
Oh my God. Oh, why? Why would you do that?
Nibbles and bits.
How about Kyle's munchies?
Through,
I'll take
what's
Kyle's
the last word there?
Provence, as in France.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna just wing that one there. Is that Provence?
Close enough, yeah.
You know what? I'll take close enough. There we go. Pedaling through Provence. Awesome. The author is gonna be Alex. I think that was you. So I'm gonna say Alex there. And then we're gonna go ahead and say food type. What is the food type of that? I actually am, that's an honest question.
French.
French, all right. I'll take it. I love escargot. All right, French it is. Perfect. So awesome. This right here is how we create the instance of the cookbook. Let's go to console log our cookbook 1 to see what we're actually going to get back here. I'm going to go and run this. And take a look at what we get back. We get this very, very interesting object back. So we see our curly brackets. That's why I'm calling it an object. But there's one thing that really denotes that as a class. We see the word up here of the class type, cookbook. So if someone asks you, what is your class type? The answer in this case would be of class cookbook, because that's your class type. You're creating your own types of classes here. And then we have the properties inside of it, the title, author, and then food type. That's the information right there. So for that, for cookbook 1, if I wanted to get back the food type and console log it, instead of just console logging the whole object, what would I put on the end of here? I just want to get back the food type.
Food type.
Food type.
Very good, food type. There we go. We're going to run this and see what we get. Awesome. Now, the next question is, if I want to get back the title.
.title. Console.log. .title. Yes.
Very good. We're going to do .title. But this is a very interesting one about the information. So cookbook1.title. But if we come up here, we have nothing that talks about a title inside of there. Now, don't let that deter you. Remember, just because it's not inside of here doesn't mean it's not contained, because it was inherited by book. So a big thing is if you're trying to diagnose a class or you're trying to find like a bug or something inside of your class, make sure you come up here and look, who does it extend? Extends book. I come up here and I see that title is included inside of book, which again is inherited by cookbook. Therefore, it can be used. Now, finally, I want to show one more thing. We're going to call rate the book. Close parentheses, run that. And even though it's a cookbook, we're able still to rate that book. Remember, that function is included inside of here. Now, awesome. There we go. We're able to run everything inside of that book. Now, what if I put down here a function called cook it up or something like that? Open and close parentheses, console.log. It's time to cook. My question to you all is, I created a cook it up book here, and I'm going to create a book 1 equals new book. Whatever. The only one I can think of right now. Go, Doug, go. One of my favorite books as a kid. There you go. And then, of course, Starson right there. I think it was Dr. Seuss, but we all know that. All right. Now, my question to you all is, I go ahead and comment out this section real quick. What's going to happen? Dot cook it up. What's going to happen when I do that?
It's undefined.
It's gonna print it's time to cook. Wait.
Undefined.
What is this?
It's not attached to book 1. It's not attached to book 1. Yeah.
Method is
Error.
that
Yeah.
cooking it up method is only for the cooking up method is only for the children, so it won't be applicable to.
I heard it. I heard it. Awesome job, everyone.
No.
If we look at the error on the right-hand side here, it
Yeah,
says book
it's not
1
gonna-
cook it up is not a function. Book 1 is, cook it up is not a function. Because cook it up is only a function within the cookbook.
Cookbook, yes.
But does book know anything about cookbook?
No.
No, it has
Right?
no idea.
Yeah.
It has no idea. It's not attached to it at all. Cookbook is attached to book, but that doesn't mean book is attached to cookbook. It's only attached to book because it says extends book. It's a one-way attachment there. Inheritance is one-way street. If you have blue eyes, but your parents have brown eyes, there's no way your parents can get blue eyes because they're already born. Inheritance is a one-way street. Just like in coding, it is a one-way street. It only goes from top to bottom. You cannot extend a class that extends another class. You do not want to do that either. You cannot say class book extends cookbook. That is some weird stuff. You just don't want to do that at all. Do not try to extend a class that extends it. That cannot also work. So big thing to note here is inheritance goes one way. Goes one way. So this was an introduction to the classes, an introduction into inheritance, and kind of what we can see here and there, the limitations of inheritance. With JavaScript, it is a very important factor, especially with classes, because JavaScript can be object-oriented. So it has a bunch of objects in it, basically able to hold information and do something with it inside of your application. That being said, with our classes and our inheritance, that is all I wrote for this one to really dig into our stuff. So with a little bit of extra time here, I'll take any final questions we have about the stuff that we went over today.
In line 24, if we are not passing the argument start, will it show any error?
For JavaScript, it will not. Nope. But I have to take this out first. No, because if you pass it nothing, you still passed it something. What is that nothingness that you pass if you pass nothing?
No.
Undefined.
Undefined. Very good. JavaScript is undefined. It means you didn't pass anything. So if I did a console.log on book1.title, or excuse me, that would be author, my printout would be what?
Undefined.
Undefined. Very good. And that's exactly what we get here. It's very hard to read, but it does say undefined, I promise.
Okay.
I got a quick question.
All right, what's up?
If we have another class under Cookbook, and it would be, it could just be like just another book, so like novel, right?
Okay.
Could we use Cook It Up and the function that we used in our book class in novel?
What does novel extend?
Novel is gonna be extending Cookbook. So no, we couldn't. It would have to extend book, right?
Well, if your grandparent has blue eyes and it passed them down to your parent, and then you got blue eyes, then inheritance, again, always goes top down. Everything from your grandparent comes down to you. So inheritance is a one-way street, but it brings everything.
Okay.
So grandparent is the book, your parent is the cookbook, you are the novel. So in that case, it's a trickle-down effect in which our novel now, and we'll say novel here, we are now able to say cook it up. Why a novel will ever be a cookbook? Not up to argument there. So let's say cook it up. Oh, book one. Lies.
Novel.
I mean, have you read cooking blogs? Some of them are like novels.
Your U isn't capitalized, Kyle. And Cook It Up.
Oh, thank you. I was like, Rafa, what are you doing to me? There we go. There we go. It's time to cook. We can also go ahead and we can rate the book. See what happens here. There we go. 2 paws up.
Okay.
So we just saw that trickle down effect all the way to your novel or your grandkid or whatever.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question.
I've got a question actually.
Yeah, Jody, what's up?
The super thing, right? So my question is, if you do super, but you don't pass any parameters, does JavaScript just pass everything from the up down, or does it just pass nothing? In other words, are you required to put in the parameters after super, or can you just put super left, right, parenthesis, and it will pass everything?
So if you do super open and close parentheses or left and right parentheses, it will pass nothing.
Okay,
like we just
so
talked about,
you are
what
required. Okay.
You are not required to. It will pass nothing. And again, remember in JavaScript, nothing is something.
Well, it's undefined, again? But it won't. Correct. But so if you don't, what if you only pass? I don't know. Let's say your class has six parameters. I don't know. Title, author, copyright, publisher, ISBN.
Okay.
So it's got like 5 parameters. But let's say in the super, you only pass title, author, and copyright. I'm assuming that's all it will inherit then?
Well, yes, it will inherit those values that you gave, but also I will also inherit the undefines. remember, undefined is still something. So what you're asking is, if you provide those values, will they be passed down? And the answer is yes. If you have 1,000,000 parameters, but you only define one, those 1,000,000 parameters are still initialized to undefined. So all that value is still passed down, whether or not you've actually provided a true value.
There's still enumerable properties, and if you did something that like listed out its enumerable properties, it would list those undefined properties because they're in the superclass definition.
Unless you set, what if I passed, I don't know, those 3 parameters, and then further down said, I don't know, copyright equals, I don't know, whatever year it was. So would it then assign it correctly?
Okay, we're getting really specific here. So when you say pass it down a little bit later, what do you mean by that exactly? We're looking at the example of book being the superclass, inherited by cookbook, inherited by novel. So when we're talking about these 3, I guess, can you explain your question a little bit there?
But let's say in book, because I don't know what, I can't see your code. I don't know what parameters you have in book, just title and
book
author, I
has
guess?
title and author.
Yeah, but let's say that you added, I don't know, copyright, publisher, ISBN, right? So now you've got 5 parameters for book, all right? And then
3, 4, and 5.
And then Cookbook extends that, and you do super, but in your super, all you pass is title and author. You don't pass publisher, copyright, and ISBN. You don't, yes, they'll be undefined, but then further down, after you do your super with only the 2 arguments, can you then say, I don't know, copyright equals 1962, and it will actually assign it to 1962?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you passed undefined, it's still initialized that variable to undefined. But if you want to re-initialize it, you can always reset your class variables or reassign your class variables to whatever value you'd like.
Okay, I was just trying to figure out whether, so basically you could just type super, left parenthesis, right parenthesis, and then assign your things as you please. You don't have to actually pass actual names there. Like it'll just
you
copy
don't
everything.
have to. It's not recommended. You typically want to initialize your class to whatever values you have at hand. But if you don't, for whatever reason, have those values, you could assign them later.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And for everyone else, I do want to explain that a little bit real quick. So what the question was is that if we're looking at these supers right now, and we wanted to just create our cookbook, let's go ahead and just do that. So if our new book is going to be cookbook, and we're not going to pass in anything into those parentheses there. So what's going to happen is in the cookbook say, oh, I want you to pass in all this stuff. We're not going to give it any of it. We're not going to give it a title, an author, or a food type. So all this nothingness is going to be called undefined. So we pass undefined into our super here. What happens? Title and author get set to undefined. Down here, also gets set to undefined. So if we come here real quick and we're going to console log our book 1, which again is that cookbook, take a look at all of our values we have inside of that class object there. We see that title is undefined, author is undefined, food type is undefined. Neato. But what if we wanted to, as Jody's question was, what if we wanted to set those variables to something? Well, in that case, we do it just how we did it before. Book 1 dot food type, we'll call it French, just to keep with that ENCH there. So food type equals French. We're going to go ahead and then console log over time. Come in here, and we see that now our food type is French. We're able to reassign those class variables to our discretion. So if you ever did want to do that for whatever reason, again, if you didn't have those values at hand, you can assign them later. Again, it's not recommended, but sometimes those scenarios do exist. No, I think I cut somebody off. I think someone else was asking a question there.
Well, because the title of the title of the cookbook would be different from the title of the original book, is what I'm saying. So just passing title doesn't, if you pass title through super, you're going to get the same title as you got above there, right? So if the initial title was, I don't know, a big dog, and you pass title through super, then your title in your extended class, which is cookbook, is now going to be a big dog.
So remember, when cookbook extends book, all it's taking is its properties in. and it's becoming a cookbook with the book's properties. Cookbook is still just a cookbook. There's
You
no
still end
book
up with one
inside
object in the end.
Yeah, thank you very much, Colin. Yeah, you'll end up, Jody, in a sense, you end up with one object. There are not two cookbooks at hand here that have one title. It is just one object with one title. That title property existing in book that was inherited by cookbook when we use the keyword extends.
Oh, so it doesn't set the value.
It does set the value inside of a single object.
Wait. The super keyword does it set the value when you pass title through it?
Super calls the constructor of the parent class the class that you're inheriting from or extending.
Correct, it does. So super will pass the information to the super class's constructor. Just because they're two constructors doesn't mean they're two different objects. It's just using super to construct one object of cookbooks properties as well as books properties. You still end up with one object.
Oh, Kyle, I have one more question.
Yeah, Rena.
Okay. We are doing this extends. This is gonna work the same file if you create the different class, right? How about if you make a different file, different class, and I want to import and use this one, how can we use?
So I think, to repeat the question, make sure I got it correctly.
Okay.
Are you asking if we create another class within a different file, how we bring it into here?
Yes.
Unfortunately, I can't do that with Replit, but when we get into the next portion with Visual Studio, we'll be able to do that. But what you're going to want to do is that, and that's why I really don't like Replit teaching with classes, but it is giving us good things. But typically your classes are kept within separate, within separate files. So you'll typically have a file for each class. In this case, we are just creating them within here. So Rena, I'll get back to your question when we are in a different environment, working with some different stuff.
Okay.
No, but it is possible.
Can you module.exports the class just like any other, like you can a function or a file or whatever? Can you?
Not. The thing is that you can't import anything in here because it's not a module. It would kind of work. I think I was trying to play around with it, how to get Replit to actually do it. But in this case, I wouldn't want to show the example just because it's going to look extremely weird, and I would not recommend using that tactic.
Because the class definition is technically a kind of special function because JavaScript actually uses the prototype chain.
I would have to understand a little bit more about that context exactly, but I'll look into that, Raiden. I don't know exactly about that. Okay, sorry. We're getting off topic here. Yeah. Go ahead and do any more questions. We got 2 more minutes.
Okay, mine's real quick. So since Novel extends Cookbook, right? Wouldn't you be able to, inside of the super, include food type instead of having to redeclare food type in there?
Okay, so
because you already have food type inside of Cookbook. So wouldn't you be able to just put food type inside of the super of Novel?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That was just a very quick one, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's just because he copy pasted the code from Cookbook.
Oh, okay. All right. Gotcha.
But no, great on deducing that. You're absolutely right. So yeah, you just pass food type in that super and get passed up. Very good. Another good thing to note on this super, remember this super right here is extending Cookbook, so it calls up to this constructor. This super is then called and calls up to Cookbook. Remember, they're going to utilize all those constructors to build just one object in the end. But again, this is a good way, instead of duplicating that code, we're able to inherit pre-existing code to build our classes a little bit easier. Awesome, everyone. All right, well, in the end, fantastic questions, one and all. Classes is a very, very interesting topic just because it does combine everything that we've learned previously, but gives us a new thing to really think about and kind of how to conceptualize some things that JavaScript is doing. So what I'm saying is just work with it, go ahead and test it out in Replit, see what you can do with it, see its limitations, have fun with inheritance, and in the end, have fun with your studio night, get more into those classes, Feel free to come back for the studio review at 8 o'clock. We're going to be working through it together. Other than that, everyone, thank you again so much for your participation. Thank you for dealing with me. Hopefully, I am back on my feet here by Thursday. Don't forget also that walkthrough of assignment 3 is on Thursday as well. Other than that, have a fantastic night, fantastic week, and I will talk to you all later.